You wake up, check your phone before your feet even touch the floor, and the first light you see today isn't the sun. It's a screen. By the time you actually step outside, the day is already half interpreted for you. Weather app, traffic app, notifications. The world has been translated before you ever look at it. Your ancestors had no translation layer. The first light they saw every single morning was the actual sky. And it wasn't decoration, it was the only information system they had. So here's the question this video is built around. If you stripped away every screen, every streetlight, every wall, what would Earth actually look like? Not the postcard version, the real one. Because the planet your ancestors lived on and the planet you live on are, in almost every sensory way, two different worlds. Start with color, because this is where most people get it wrong. We picture the ancient world in the same muted tones as a museum diorama, dusty browns, faded greens. It wasn't like that. Before agriculture flattened continents into single crop fields, the land was a patchwork of extremes. Old-growth forests so dense the canopy blocked most daylight, giving way without warning to open grassland blazing under full sun. Rivers ran in colors we rarely see now, some milky with glacial silt, others black with tannins from decomposing leaves, others so clear you could count pebbles 10 feet down because nothing upstream was pumping anything into them. There was no such thing as a natural landscape that looked tired. Everything was either actively growing or actively being eaten, and both states are vivid. Then there was the sheer volume of animal life, which is maybe the hardest thing for a modern brain to picture accurately. We think of wildlife encounters as rare, a deer at the edge of a highway, a hawk overhead. Ancient humans lived inside what ecologists now call shifting baseline abundance. Herds of migratory grazers stretching to the horizon, predator populations dense enough that a walk to fetch water carried real, calculated risk, skies genuinely darkened by flocks of birds numbering in the millions. The passenger pigeon alone, before it was hunted to extinction in the 1900s, is estimated to have once numbered in the billions in North America. Flocks so large that witnesses described the sky staying dark for hours as one moved overhead. That wasn't folklore, that was Tuesday. Multiply that kind of density across every ecosystem on Earth, and you start to understand that ancient humans weren't looking at nature. They were embedded inside a functioning organism, and they were one species among thousands of loud, visible, competing others. Now take away the light pollution, because this is the layer that changes people's understanding fastest. Today, roughly a third of humanity can no longer see the Milky Way from where they sleep. Your ancestors saw it every clear night of their entire lives, without exception, from birth to death. Not as a faint haze, as a physical structure overhead, bright enough to throw shadows on open ground. Early astronomers and travelers who documented pristine dark skies in the 1800s described being able to read text by starlight alone on a clear, moonless night. That's not a special event. That was simply what the sky did, every night, for the entire existence of our species until the last couple of centuries. But the sky was only the ceiling. The ground itself carried its own kind of visibility, one we've almost completely lost the ability to read. Every track in soft earth, every broken twig, every disturbed patch of moss told a story to someone trained to see it. An animal's size, its direction, how recently it had passed, whether it was injured or afraid. Anthropologists who've spent time with remaining hunter-gatherer communities, from the Kalahari to the Amazon, consistently report the same thing. Trackers reading ground disturbance with a level of precision that looks, to an untrained observer, indistinguishable from magic. It isn't magic, it's attention, refined over an entire lifetime, applied to a landscape that never stopped generating information. To them, the ground wasn't scenery under their feet, it was a live feed. Smell worked the same way, and this is the sense we've lost the most completely because it leaves no trace and gets almost no attention in how we imagine the past. A change in wind carrying the scent of a distant fire. The specific smell of rain approaching from miles out, sometimes hours before a single drop fell. Certain plants releasing oils only when bruised or disturbed by something moving through them, which meant a shift in scent could mean an animal or a threat was nearby before it was ever seen or heard. The human nose is capable of distinguishing an enormous range of distinct odors, far more than most people assume, and in a world without exhaust fumes, without synthetic fragrance, without the constant chemical fog of modern life, that capacity was actually being used, constantly, as a survival tool. There's a reason this particular sense barely comes up in most retellings of the past. Smell doesn't fossilize. A footprint can be cast, a tool can be dated, a bone can be measured and cataloged. A scent leaves nothing behind for a museum case. So it quietly drops out of the record entirely, even though it was carrying real, moment-to-moment information the whole time. Which is a useful reminder in general. The past we've reconstructed is really the past that happened to leave physical evidence, not necessarily the past exactly as it was lived. And sound. Before engines, before electricity, the acoustic landscape of Earth was layered in a way that's almost impossible to reconstruct today, because so much of it is gone. Bioacoustic researchers who've spent decades recording wild habitats report something genuinely alarming. Many locations that were rich with insect, frog, and bird activity just a few decades ago are now measurably quieter. Not because anyone silenced them on purpose, but because the species that made those sounds have declined or vanished. For ancient humans, that soundscape wasn't ambiance. It was an early warning system. A sudden hush in the middle of the day meant something dangerous had entered the area. A change in bird alarm calls, learned and distinguished the way we distinguish words, told an experienced listener not just that danger was near, but what kind and roughly where. So picture it now, all the layers stacked together, a morning tens of thousands of years ago, somewhere on this same planet. The sky is doing something with light and color that no modern person born under artificial light has ever fully witnessed. The ground is broadcasting the movements of everything that walked across it in the last day. The air carries scent information from miles away. The soundscape is dense enough to function as a map you can hear, and a small group of people is standing in the middle of all of it, not observing the world the way a tourist observes a view, but reading it fluently, the way you're reading these words right now, without effort, because it's the only world they ever knew. There's one more layer worth sitting with, because it changes the emotional shape of everything above. How few of them there actually were. For most of human history, the entire global population of our species numbered somewhere in the low millions, a rounding error compared to today. That meant enormous stretches of the planet had no human presence at all, ever, for anyone alive to encounter. A person could walk for days and cross no trace of another human being, only the tracks, calls, and scent of everything else that lived there. Earth, to ancient humans, wasn't a shared, crowded, mapped-out place the way it is now. It was mostly wild, mostly silent of people, and mostly indifferent to whether humans existed at all. That's a very different psychological position than the one we occupy today, surrounded on every side by other people, other buildings, other signals competing for attention. Their world had far less noise from us, and far more noise from everything else. That world didn't vanish in some sudden catastrophe. We built over it, gradually, one wall and one streetlight and one paved road at a time, trading direct contact with the living, broadcasting planet for comfort, safety, and convenience. That trade wasn't wrong, but it did happen almost entirely without anyone noticing, and it's worth understanding exactly what was on the other side of it, because the part of you built to read that world hasn't gone anywhere. It's still in there. It just hasn't had much to read in a very long time.